Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 26 of College Football Throwdown, a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Good evening, football fans.
That's right. Yes, we're here to talk about Week 10 of the college football season and the new playoff rankings that just came out today, as well as the upcoming games of Week 11.
Yes.
And on last week, we talked about how there were quite a number of good games, and there were some of those good games turned out to be good games, but then there were some big upsets that people weren't expecting, including one that's a little close to home for us Cornhusker fans.
That's right, absolutely. And in honor of that particular victory, I'm going to go ahead and do what is part of our podcast, which is opening the proverbial beverage, which that's why I've still got a sore throat. I'm still recovering from the cheering and conversation in the game and post-game activities. So here we go.
Very nice. Yeah, actually, we had both, in terms of predictions, we had both predicted the losses, for the Nebraska-Michigan State game. So we were pleasantly surprised in that regard.
Yes.
Certainly.
Well, and I don't remember. Hopefully you'll have it. The other games, the national games we predicted, but I suspect that there might be a game or two there that we were wrong too.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, actually, we're 1-1. You and I.
Okay.
I had predicted that Clemson would beat Florida State 41-38, and you predicted that that Florida State was going to win 41-38.
Yes.
So I ended up being right there. In reality, Clemson ended up winning that game 23-13, kind of a low-scoring game, not quite like we predicted.
That's true. Yep. But a good game nonetheless. Interesting how that turned out. Same with the LSU Alabama game. I think from a scoring standpoint, there maybe wasn't as much scoring as we thought there was going to be, and we should know that by now. That when you get into November and you get the really good teams playing each other late in the season, that defense starts to rise to the forefront.
Well, yeah, that was definitely true in the Alabama-LSU game. I wasn't watching it, but I was listening to it on the radio when I was driving back from San Francisco, and I think it would be a fair statement to say that Alabama's front seven on their defense is probably just as good or better than anyone else's in the country right now.
Right. I would agree.
Yeah, because they completely shut down Leonard Fournette in that game, which people were not expecting, for sure.
That's true.
So, yeah, the score was, as it turns out, where was it? 30-16, but it kind of sounds like Alabama was more in control of that game than the score would make you think.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That score is not indicative at all of what is going to go on there.
Yeah. Well, and I lost out on that one because I was under this impression that LSU was going to make it into the top four. They were one of my picks for the playoff. And I had them winning 35-32, whereas you had Alabama winning 24-17. So you won out on that one. That prediction.
Right.
Yes. And more positive news, though, for my playoff prediction hopes. Oklahoma State beat TCU, who I have them pegged as one of my four teams as the winner of the Big 12. And, they had a commanding victory, 49-29 over TCU.
Yeah. The Alabama game and its, how it played out maybe was a little surprising, but overall, not a surprise to me. Even the Clemson-Florida State game, although I had predicted a Florida State victory, not a huge surprise that it went the other way. But Oklahoma State beating TCU the way they did is more of a surprise in my mind. I did not expect that. I thought that TCU would go in there and kind of expose Oklahoma State a little bit, and they didn't.
Yeah.
Boy, Oklahoma State looked very dominant.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, too, when you think about the fact that TCU, for a good portion of the season, like the AP polls and stuff, was ranked number 2 in the country, right behind Ohio State, and now their kind of playoff hopes have been dashed a bit.
Right. Well, and now TCU, they play Kansas this week, so they'll be completely off the map. Um, so it's not looking too good for TCU. I mean, they have a couple of chances here. They play the other two big boys of the Big 12 the following 2 weeks, but this week's going to be an off the radar week and may cause them to slide a little bit in that poll.
Right. Well, and as we get into our playoff discussion, the way it's kind of playing out, it seems like for the Big 12 to have a representative, somebody needs to go undefeated. That seems to be pretty much their only way of making it.
I really think that's true. I mean, unless some really odd things start to happening in some of the other conferences, unexpected type of things, that the best chance for the Big 12 to be in the mix is going to be an undefeated Baylor and an undefeated Oklahoma State running the table.
Yeah. And going back to the other upset, Nebraska beating MSU 39-38. Michigan State is still in control of their own destiny. If they can beat Michigan and Ohio State, they would. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? But they would go to the championship game in that case, because their one loss would be to us, but they'd have the head-to-head win over Ohio State, who would have one loss, and so then they would go.
Correct. That is correct. Michigan State completely controls their own destiny relative to the Big Ten. However, I would say that it's not obvious that they would be one of the top 4 if they won out, even because they're going to play an Iowa team that would be highly regarded, highly ranked, just because they're undefeated. But if they then proceeded to beat Iowa in a Big Ten championship game out there in the future, I'm just not convinced that would wow enough voters. Enough of the panel to it depends on what everybody else does, right? It becomes one of those dynamic question marks.
Well, I'd say in that scenario, 2 things are very important, because one, they have a win over Michigan, but a win that everybody knows was a last-second fluky thing. So that game was really almost closer to being a tie than anything. And then 2, does Michigan State go in there and crush Iowa and Iowa looks terrible, or do they both come in and play good football and it's a close game and Michigan State wins, but Iowa still looks good? In that scenario, I think Michigan State can still make it in. But yeah, if Iowa just looks like crap against them, then nobody's going to give Iowa credence.
Right. That could very well be the case. But yep, absolutely right.
That's right. Okay, getting on to some of the other interesting games. Navy beating Memphis 45-20. Big upset.
Big upset. Again, not a complete surprise, because when you play Navy, that unique offense, it's tough, man. And then their defense is surprisingly good. So it was that Navy was going to be a matchup that was going to be very tough on Memphis, and it sure was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was interesting to see. And then some great games in the SEC. Ole Miss and Arkansas, 52-53. Arkansas wins in overtime.
And that crazy play at the end, which I've never quite seen one like that. That wasn't the last play of the game. It was on a 4th down play during overtime. But just how that all played out was kind of a first, in my watching of college football, that someone would have that the thought of just throwing the ball up in the air and backwards.
Right. And isn't this the game where they went for 2 at the end and got it?
Yes.
Right.
And you may recall they went for 2 earlier in the year and didn't get it in a game in which they could have won, but if they had extended themselves into maybe another overtime. Mm-hmm. And I think he chose to go for 2. So interesting choices there.
Yeah, I wonder if that coach was influenced at all by Tom Osborne's big 2-point moment.
No. I doubt it.
No?
No, I don't think that had any thought at all.
Sorry, I didn't mean about that specific scenario, but I just mean about his. We've seen it repeat here. I'm just talking about his general philosophy of going for 2 in those sorts of situations.
Right. Well, and again, once you're talking about 2 different eras. That the era when Osborne did that occurred during a period of time when there was no ties. Excuse me, there were ties rather,
Right.
and now there's overtime. And so, Tom Osborne was going for the win rather than the tie. It
Right.
wasn't going for the win versus going for a chance to go into overtime
Exactly. Yeah, you're
or
right.
continuing in overtime.
Very different
Yeah.
scenarios.
So, yep.
And then the other one being Auburn upsetting Texas A&M 26-10. Just,
Yes. Well, and again, A&M is just another year where they seem a year away.
yeah. Well, and Auburn's interesting because, they're obviously a historically extremely powerful school. And I guess I believe this was like coming off like a 2-game loss or
Okay.
two losses in a row for Auburn.
Right, right. So they needed a win badly.
Yeah, another interesting one. One of your predictions for going to the top four to the playoff is Florida, and they had a 9-7 win over Vanderbilt. That's kind of a
Right.
strange victory.
And recall that prediction was before 2 weeks ago when I didn't realize that Florida's quarterback had been suspended for the year. Without their quarterback, they clearly aren't the same team offensively.
Yep. And then we have Northern Illinois upset Toledo, taking down one of the undefeateds.
Yep.
So that was another interesting one. And then Baylor beat Kansas State, but only beat them 31-24. Not
Yes, and it was
exactly.
close, and it was a very close game, and only a score at the end kind of thing created that margin. I mean, Kansas State was very much in that game to the very end.
Right. So kind of putting some more question marks on Baylor's defense again, which has kind of been the question mark all year for
Oh,
them.
and their offense. I mean, this explosive offense that was putting up these pinball machine numbers against basically no team, and this was discussed in length in today's unveiling of the rankings. Baylor has not beaten a team that has a better than 500 record yet.
Wow.
It's week 10. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I read right the has the Big 12 chosen to, or yeah, the Big 12 chosen to do this on purpose, like purposefully scheduling all the best teams near the end of the season.
Well, you could argue that they maybe did that because certainly from a traditional power standpoint, um, having the Oklahomas and Oklahoma State's matchup at the end has traditionally always happened. I mean, Bedlam has always been one of the late games of the season ever since the Big 12 was created anyway. And prior to that, of course, Oklahoma always played Nebraska last. Um, but but they always have the Red River Shootout, which is Oklahoma, Texas, and that's usually early in the year. So they do have some, traditional games earlier in the year. I'm not sure it was something they consciously did. I don't know that they knew that Oklahoma State and TCU and Baylor, three teams that have not historically been powers within that conference, were all going to emerge as
Yeah.
players and be playing each other in this little round robin. I don't think it was conscious.
Yeah, I guess that's true because historically you rank Texas up there as one of the best teams. Those games were played more middle of the season.
Correct, exactly. So I don't think it was necessarily conscious, but it's sure working out good for the Big 12 because if they're going to try to be able to make a statement and get into this playoff system, then they've set themselves up to do that.
Yep.
So
And this is interesting. Ohio State beat Minnesota 28-14. They played Cardell Jones, right, because JT Barrett was suspended for a game because of his mistake, correct?
right, that is correct.
That's right. And wasn't Braxton Miller was brought in as like the second teamer, right? Like,
Correct. And Braxton Miller got hurt in that game at Minnesota, and I don't really know. I haven't done the research to find out if what his injury status is as far as availability this week and beyond.
interesting. Alrighty then. And then this is an interesting one within the Big Ten. Northwestern Penn State. Northwestern won 23-21, a close game.
Yes, yes. And big win for Northwestern, I think. Really big win.
Yeah, well, you know, I heard some people there was a guy, I was just watching a video, he was talking about how Iowa doesn't deserve their spot and how the Big Ten there's only three good teams in the Big Ten, and saying like Northwestern and Minnesota and Indiana and those other kind of middle-ish teams in the conference right now are not worth anything. But I mean, Northwestern only has two losses. They're ranked in the top 25, so they're
Yeah,
still.
and the problem is they have that just whitewashing that happened at Iowa, and or against Iowa, I should say. I think it was actually at home, but it's just inexplicable for a team that also beat Stanford.
Yeah. And then last one, Houston over Cincinnati, 30-33. They won, but a close game for them, who's another one of those undefeated teams.
Well, and some of those things are all going to play out this week. So, the beauty of November is just going to be an awesome month of football.
That's right. All right, we've already talked about it a bit, but obviously we had the newest round of the college football playoff rankings, and in the top four positions as of right now, we have Clemson at number 1, Alabama at number 2, Ohio State at number 3, and Notre Dame at number 4. LSU getting bumped out of there because of their loss against Alabama.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And and again, I would say that as you look at those, you can look at you have to look both backwards and forwards to kind of understand these rankings. And I think it's really important that everyone who looks at these rankings recognizes that committee has made it clear that they look at each set of data independent of the previous week. And so what the rankings are this week do not influence what the rankings are going to be next week. They don't. They've put in a great deal of effort to make sure that they minimize that bias of where were you ranked before. They know that they're going to have to justify shifting or changes that occur, but they were willing to do that last year, and they basically stood behind their analysis. So, as I look at this and I kind of look forward and back with each of the four teams you mentioned in the top four, frankly, three of them look pretty sound, that if they win out, they're likely destined to stay in those spots. Now, I will admit that probably the one that is most vulnerable is going to be Ohio State. Ohio State has to not only win their games, but I think they have to win in somewhat impressive fashion. They can't struggle and get lucky and beat Michigan State, or get lucky in a last-minute scenario against Michigan. They have to beat those two teams soundly. And then they have to go to the Big 12 or Big 10 championship game, and in all likelihood play an Iowa school that most people will perceive to be much worse, and that they have to beat them handily. Not like they did last year where they just crushed Wisconsin, but I mean a sound, solid victory. If they do those things, then no one can jump them, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And, the fact of the matter is that our beating Michigan State doesn't help them in that regard, because if they were going up against Michigan State when Michigan State was still undefeated, then the perception would be different.
Absolutely agree. Now, Clemson looks to have already won all of its tough games, and now looks to finish the year out with 3 games that they should win fairly comfortably. And then they're going to play in a conference championship game where the opponent is going to be North Carolina. And North Carolina is not going to present a huge challenge to them, in my opinion. So I think Clemson's got a very good path into the playoff. And they're already ranked number 1. So Clemson's in my view. And then similarly, Alabama, they do have to still play Auburn and Mississippi State, but Alabama, I think, is playing at a level that leads me to believe they will go undefeated. They'll play Florida. I think Florida's already secured their side of the conference. So Florida's going to be the opponent, and Florida without their quarterback is not likely going to be a big challenge for Alabama.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that. Although I do think, looking forward to this weekend, the Alabama, it's at Mississippi State, so that will be an interesting game. That's the toughest game they have left on their schedule. Auburn isn't ranked right now. Mississippi State is. So
right, and Mississippi State has a really good, mature quarterback. And if Alabama's got a weakness, it might be in that secondary. People keep talking about their front seven. If you're going to attack Alabama, you better have a premier quarterback who can make them pay.
Okay. And this was a question I want to bring up. Should we, because we both made our own potential playoff rankings before the week before the official rankings came out. At that time, my top four was Clemson, LSU, Ohio State, and Stanford. Yours was Clemson, Ohio State, Florida, and Notre Dame. Now, should we? Do you think we should like adjust those? Like say, okay, well, this is where we stand on our top four as of week 10.
I would say yes, but let's just spend a little time on that, Alex, because so many people do that. I think the more important discussion was to clarify, because you listen to the talking heads on that program, and again, they're already overreacting to Iowa's placement at 5. I think that's the significant thing that everybody's focused on, and you're going to read a bunch of that over the next day or two, and everybody's going to be like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe Iowa's 5th." Well, I can tell you right now that the teams that lie 6th is Baylor. If you have the list in front of you, please share it with me. Who is 7 and 8? They talked about the fact that those were the 4 teams that got most of the discussion.
Stanford is 7. Oklahoma State is 8.
Okay, so you got Baylor and Oklahoma State, 2 Big 12 teams. If either of those undefeated teams proceeds to an undefeated season, then I think there's going to be some really fascinating debates about whether they are 4th or Notre Dame is 4th. And I guarantee you, if Iowa won out and Oklahoma State won out, it would be really tough to put Iowa in there. I guess they would get in there likely under the strength of beating an Ohio State. But let's say that Ohio State gets beat by Michigan, and Michigan ends up going to the Big Ten championship game, but then Iowa beats a Michigan team, with 2 losses. What then? Well, I think that's not enough for Iowa, and they get booted, and undefeated Oklahoma State gets in. You know what I mean? So I think there's a bunch of scenarios. So that group from 8th through 4th, it's very dynamic.
Yeah,
and it's going to change every week.
Yeah, well, because the big game we can all see coming is that at the end of the season, Notre Dame and Stanford play each other, and whoever wins that game, that's going to be very important to both teams' chances for making into that top 4.
Right. And it's going to be important to whoever plays Stanford in the Pac-12 championship game too.
Mm-hmm. And this was going to be my similar to you. I mean, my scenario. Let's say that Notre Dame beats Stanford, so they beat who they're supposed to beat, and they don't play in a conference championship game. Then you have a Utah team who, let's say, wins out what they have left to play, so they beat Stanford in their conference championship game, so they're a one-loss team like Notre Dame. And then you have Oklahoma State or Baylor, alternatively, one of the two, go undefeated in the Big 12. And so you have those 3 teams kind of vying for that number 4 spot, presuming that Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State win what's left of their games.
And so then when you start making the debates about that, then it becomes an issue of, who have you beaten and what have those teams done? So then all of a sudden, because in a scenario like you just described, Utah's biggest wins would be against a Stanford team that lost to Notre Dame, right? In your scenario, and also their other big one of their other big wins was a Michigan team that would now be 9-3 because they would have lost to Michigan State, Ohio State, and to Utah. So how big is that? So just all those implications start playing it out. And it's just going to be really interesting. If Notre Dame wins out and they win that Stanford game, I think it's going to be really, really hard for anyone other than a Baylor or an Oklahoma State to bounce them out.
Right. Although it'd be interesting. I mean, let's say that like Baylor wins out, but they'll have beaten the TCU team that, let's say, has 3 losses by that point.
Right.
If they kind of crumble here a bit at the end, and then an Oklahoma State team that
maybe has 2 losses because they lose to Oklahoma and and to TC
Right.
or to Baylor.
And then
Yeah.
an Oklahoma team that has 2 losses,
Right.
So then that gets a little tricky too.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very interesting.
It is, and so it's about that process. So very quickly, give me your new top four.
Okay, well I'm gonna
Actually, give me your new top six.
new top 6. Oh, okay.
I like what they did on the TV show.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because those other 2 teams are the closest to kind of vying for that number 4 spot.
Right.
I'm gonna stick with what I was saying earlier. Although I'm switching out LSU for Alabama now. So Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State. I feel pretty confident that those 3 can win out and make it in. And then I'm gonna go ahead and say, I'll go ahead and say Notre Dame for the number 4 spot.
Okay.
And then for number 5, I'm going to continue with my prediction from before. I'm going to say Oklahoma State is, well,
Yep.
I mean, this would be, I guess, an Oklahoma State team with 1 loss in my. Because, I mean, if Oklahoma State goes undefeated, then. Because the thing I think is interesting with Oklahoma State, because I heard somebody talk about this before, is that they looked really good in their win against TCU, but they've also struggled to win a lot of their games throughout the season. So how does that reflect on them if they are undefeated and going up against a 1-loss Notre Dame?
Correct. Which is why they're ranked where they are.
Right. Number 8. Right. But I mean, if they beat, and if they beat Baylor and Oklahoma in these upcoming weeks, I mean, I definitely think they won't be 8th anymore.
That's true.
So
who's 5th?
Okay, so gosh darn it, I keep going back and forth with myself.
Okay,
here.
while you think about that, you think about 5 and 6. I'm going to say that my top 4 would be the same as yours, and remind everybody what my top 4 were originally. It was basically Notre Dame, Ohio State, Clemson. So 3 that have been in there. And my mistake was Florida, because I was speculating on a Florida team maybe continuing to trend in an upward fashion and surprising someone in the conference championship game there, in the SEC championship game. And that's I don't believe that anymore. So they're out and Alabama's in. So I end up in the same top 4 as you. I am not a believer in Iowa. Number one, as a Nebraska fan, I'm somewhat hopeful that we knock off Iowa, here in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. So I don't care about. I don't think Iowa's going to be in that mix. So then it becomes a question of, is it Baylor or Oklahoma State out of the Big 12? And I'm going to say it's going to be Baylor, because I'm still not sold on Oklahoma State. So I'm going to go with Baylor as number 5, and then number 6 for me is going to be right now Stanford. That's the team that I think would come in the mix, and so that sets up that de facto play-in game, which is the Notre Dame Stanford game. So there's my top 6.
Okay, well, this brings up a question: are we ranking top 6 based on right now, or what we think is going to play out by the end?
Well, I think it's about what I think is right now.
Okay, because I mean, I might rank Stanford up there, but I was thinking of this in terms of the end of the season. So I'm thinking I would rank Notre Dame at up high, that high at 4th, only if they beat Stanford. If they don't,
no, that's true.
Yep. So
yep.
That's at least how I'm viewing it. Mine is in terms of end of season. And here's what I'm going to say. I'm changing mine up a bit. Yes, I'm projecting. I'm going to go ahead and say Oklahoma State is number 4, Notre Dame is 5, because I'm going to say that Oklahoma State wins out, they're undefeated, and that fact that they're undefeated and they look good against both Baylor and Oklahoma, as well as their dominant win over TCU, gives them more, quality wins than a 1-loss Notre Dame team.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'll say. So Notre Dame is 5, and then in my scenario, Stanford would have lost to Notre Dame. So then number 6 would probably end up being, let's say, I'll go with Utah, like I said before. Let's say Utah beats Stanford in the in their championship game.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll
Okay.
say.
Okay. Very good.
Let's see here. Let's see here. Yeah, that's right. So you said your number. Remember what your 5 and 6 was again? Sorry.
My 5 is Baylor, and my 6 is Stanford. But I'm more looking at it for right now.
Right.
I still would put Iowa like 8th, because yes, they've been solid, yes, they've been consistent, but they haven't had any impressive wins except against Northwestern and Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Those definitely did widen my eyes when I saw them. So that does show they have something going good there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Alrighty then. So then looking ahead to week 11, we have the biggest game by far is Oklahoma and Baylor. Number 6 versus number 12. So that's going to be very interesting in terms of Baylor's, their hopes for a making into that top 4. They have to beat Oklahoma.
Absolutely. That's a huge game.
Yep.
And there's a couple of other interesting ones this weekend too that are going to be challenging games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one I saw was Utah plays Arizona. That might be kind of interesting.
Oregon, Stanford.
Yes, Oregon, Stanford. Arkansas against LSU right after Arkansas beat Ole Miss.
And Minnesota, Iowa, and the Big Ten is a pretty good matchup.
Yep. And Memphis, Houston in the American Conference. That's a big matchup for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So those are all interesting. Alabama, Mississippi State. That's a big one.
Yes,
too.
Absolutely. That's huge in the who does Penn State play?
I don't have that one listed down.
I wonder if it's their week off.
I do. There is Florida against South Carolina. That's an interesting one too.
Yes, but South Carolina has had a horrible season. They've just really fallen off the map. Georgia, Auburn. There's another one that should be a good game. But Auburn is Auburn starting to turn it around here at this point in the season, or was that a one game kind of reprieve?
Yeah. And this is an interesting one in the Big Ten. Michigan, Indiana. Right after Indiana.
Nearly beat Iowa.
Right.
Yeah. But Indiana's got offense. There's no question about that.
Yep. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Penn State must have the week off. That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah. And UCLA plays against Washington State in another Pac-12 matchup.
Yes.
Florida State against NC State. I think they have like 1 or 2 losses. I think they're pretty highly ranked within their conference.
So it's going to be a good weekend, not quite the marquee weekend as last weekend. And then next weekend, I think the SEC is going to start going into its annual late season Little Sisters of the Poor games that they use to get healthy. And so you'll see a few diminished big game matchups because they're basically giving themselves a bye week to prepare for their last game of the season, rivalry games like Alabama-Auburn.
Right.
And then, but next week in the Big Ten has got some great matchups because you're going to have, Michigan against Penn State. You're going to have Michigan State, Ohio State. So some huge matchups next weekend in the Big Ten.
Yep.
So.
Well, yeah, and then obviously week 13, always has lots of big games, the big rivalry games and the season.
Right. Exactly.
Yep. So there's lots to look forward to, and as we saw, we predicted, some of the big games of week 10, but then there were some that surprised us. So I bet you money there'll be some out here that are some upsets that will jump out at us this week as well.
Something for us to research a little bit here, and of course this is getting the cart before the horse, which fans always do, and we are definitely the definition of fan. With our love for the Cornhuskers, it's an interesting scenario after the very difficult season we've had for us to now be faced with a situation where we have the opportunity to finally put back-to-back victories together this weekend with a game at Rutgers. If we are able to win that game, we have the chance to then position ourselves to have a 3-game winning streak at the end of the season that gets us back to 500, makes us bowl eligible, and causes us to have 2 victories against top 10 teams in the last 3 games. And I think that we would then be the most attractive 6-6 football team in the history of bowl season. Okay, I'm serious, and I think that some bowl committees are going to be licking their chops at the opportunity to maybe get access to a program like Nebraska with a fan base that's probably going to be super energized if that were to play out. And I'm obviously hoping that that's exactly what happens for a variety of reasons. The most important one being it gives our team a chance to practice for a bowl game and get those extra reps in. But I just have a feeling that if that were to play out and we ended up 6-6 and a defeat of Iowa, that we would find ourselves going to a bowl game that is quite attractive given a 6-6 record.
Yeah. Well, I think I saw somebody joking that if that scenario were to play out, then it'd be like Nebraska came to play against like all the top 10 teams and needed to beat, but all like the bottom 70 teams that had to play, we messed up.
Right, exactly. Well, but all of a sudden people would start kind of cutting us more of a break. They would start doing the what ifs and say, this team at 6-6, but it's 3 minutes away from being 10-2. So when you're a bowl committee, it's easy to start playing the justification game to get a premier program like Nebraska to be in your stadium.
And we saw just last year, with the college football playoff with Ohio State. I mean, if they don't destroy Wisconsin the way they did in the Big Ten championship game, there's no way they're in that top 4, but they came on strong there at the end of the season, and that had an impression on people. And if we can pull off a 3-game winning streak with 2 wins against top 10 competition, that would definitely make us favorable in the what have you done for me lately eyes of the bowl people.
Right, exactly. So we'll see. As I said, cart before the horse. We still have to beat a Rutgers team out in Piscataway. So we'll see. We love college football.
And I forgot to mention this, but I wanted to ask it. In our whole hypothetical scenario of like an undefeated Baylor or Oklahoma State against Notre Dame, with 1 loss for that number 4 spot. I feel like that's an interesting scenario where the fact both teams in those scenarios don't play a conference championship game, versus like what if Notre Dame was getting put up against somebody who had won a conference championship game? Like, how would the committee view the importance of playing that extra game and winning that extra game?
I will argue that if it comes down to a Baylor versus Notre Dame and they choose Notre Dame, I guarantee you that there will be a strong argument to be made that if the Big 12 was smart enough to get themselves a conference championship game, that they would be in. Mm-hmm. I'm absolutely convinced that extra high marquee game is huge, and the Big 12 keeps holding out because they want to cling to their money of dividing by 10, instead of having to go out and do what some other conferences did, like the Pac-12 and the Big 10, to get themselves to 12. Imagine how unfair that is to the Big 10 in the pre-Nebraska being in the Big 10 days, right? When they had 11 teams for all those years, with Penn State being the 11th team, and they did not have a conference championship game because the NCAA rules wouldn't allow it, and so they sat there and watched the SEC and the Big 12 at that time, which did have a conference championship game, ironically. They watched those 2 leagues make tons of money on conference championship games, while they couldn't do it because they didn't have 12 teams. Mm-hmm. I mean, so if you now change that rule to accommodate the Big 12, there's some people that would resist that.
Oh, yeah. Well, and, oh, man, I just had a thought, and now it's escaping me.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It was something to do with what were we just, it was just before what you said about the championship game.
Oh, boy, I don't know. We can catch it another time. It's the beauty of a podcast.
Gosh darn it. Okay. Yeah, we'll do it next time. So if you go out there and enjoyed this podcast, you can email us at huskerbeat13@gmail.com. You can find us on footballthrowdown.podomatic.com. Podomatic is our website, as well as the Podomatic app, or on iTunes. You can find us there as well. Leave us comments, ratings, reviews. We always like hearing from you guys. So thank you out there for listening to this great old podcast. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.